All right, guys, if you're listening to this video or watching this video, it's because you seem to like the angelic sound of my voice as I'm reading through these articles. All right, so seeing as we just wrapped up talking about the Korean War, I figured we'd take a look at this article about how both the North and South Korea are, at least in 2018, had met for the one of the first times in a while to try and link back up because their main goal is to eventually become one Korea instead of two. All right, so title goes Historic Meeting Between North and South Korean Leaders Sets the Stage for Peace. All right. Goyang, South Korea. At a historic summit, the leaders of North and South Korea vowed Friday, April 27, to seek a nuclear free Korean peninsula and work toward a formal end to the Korean War this year. However, their meeting concluded with a few specifics on how they will reach these goals. North Korean leader Kim Jong un and South Korean President Moon Jae in set aside a year that saw them seemingly on the verge of war. They grasped hands and strode together across the cracked concrete marking the Korea's borders. So if you remember, Korea is still technically at war. They signed an armistice, which basically was an agreement just to stop fighting between the two, but they're still technically at war. So this war ended in 1953 and has been on paper still been going on to this day in the year 2021. So they've been at it for a while. Possibility of cooperative future. The sight, inconceivable just months ago, may not erase their failure to provide any new measures on a nuclear standoff that has terrified millions. Still, it allowed the leaders to step forward toward the possibility of a cooperative future. They acknowledge a difficult past and the skepticism that after decades of failed diplomacy, things will be different this time. On the nuclear issue, the leaders merely repeated a previous vow to rid the Korean peninsula of nuclear weapons, kicking one of the world's most pressing issues down the road to a much anticipated summit between Kim and the US President Donald Trump in coming weeks. So they've had multiple opportunities to converse and talk to each other about denuclearization, getting rid of nuclear weapons, but anytime they made any improvements, North Korea would either back out or they just couldn't come to an agreement. And this meeting was held before Donald Trump, our former president, uh, met with Kim Jong Un. Leaders step over border together. Still, the summit produced the spectacle of two men from nations with a history of hostility grinning after Kim walked over the border to greet Moon. Kim became the first leader of his nation to set foot on southern soil since the Korean War. Both leaders then briefly stepped together into the north and back to the south. The summit marks a swing in relations for the countries from nuclear threats and missile tests to signs of peace and cooperation. Perhaps the change is best illustrated by geography. Kim and Moon's historic handshake and later 30-minute conversation at a footbridge on the border occurred within walking distance of a spot with a darker history. A North Korean soldier fled south in a hail of gunfire there last year, and North Korean soldiers killed two US soldiers there with their axes in 1976. So the world was watching, and as it mentioned here, there has been some hostility between the two countries. Like I mentioned in that last sentence, a North Korean soldier actually fled across that border and was shot at, and it also talked about how even U.S. soldiers were attacked and killed way back then in 1976. So still a lot of turmoil in this part of the world. Vowed to achieve nuclear-free peninsula. Standing next to Moon after the talks ended, Kim faced cameras beaming his image live to the world and declared that the Koreas are linked by blood as family. The leaders also vowed to achieve a nuclear free Korean peninsula, something they've said before. The latest declaration between the Koreas, Kim said, should not repeat the unfortunate history of past inter Korean agreements, but only reach the starting line. That only reached the starting line, and which then became derailed. What happened Friday should be seen in the view of the last year. The United States, its allies South Korea and North Korea threatened and raged as the North unleashed a torrent of weapon tests. It should have been in light of the long, destructive history of the rival Koreas, which fought one of the 20th century's bloodiest conflicts and now occupy a divided peninsula that is still technically at war. Jointly pushing for talks with U.S. Trump tweeted Friday, Korean War to end, and said the United States should be very proud of what is now taking place in Korea. Both Koreas agreed to jointly push for talks this year with the United States and also potentially China to end the Korean War. It stopped with an armistice that never ended the war. Many will judge the summit based on the weak nuclear language. North Korea's nuclear and missile tests last year likely put it on a threshold of becoming a true nuclear power. The North, which has spent decades doggedly building its bombs despite near constant international criticism, claims it has already risen to that level. Conservatives skeptical of clean commitment. South Korean conservative politicians criticized the joint statement. They said it lets North Korea off the hook by failing to secure a clear commitment to a nuclear disarmament. Liberty Korea Party Chairman Hong Joon-pyo denounced the summit as a show camouflaged as peace. However, the Koreas made progress on other points of friction between them. Moon agreed to visit Pyongyang, North Korea's capital, sometime in autumn, and both leaders said they'd meet on a regular basis and exchange calls via a recently established hotline. So you have some people that are very skeptical or don't believe that they're going to denuclearize or get rid of their nuclear weapons because North Korea has said things like this in the past to get other countries to lift their sanctions, and then next thing you know, they're testing weapons or they believe they test certain nuclear weapons, which has happened quite often. All right, Western Sea border designated a peace area. They agreed to settle their disagreement over their western sea border by designating it as a peace area. Fishing activities are to be secured for both countries. They said they would open a communication office in the North Korean town of Kaesong and resume temporary reunions of relatives separated by the 1950-1953 Korean War. Kim acknowledged the widespread skepticism over their summit. There are skeptical views on whether the meeting today will yield meaningful results, Kim said. If we maintain a firm will and proceed forward hand in hand, it will be impossible for at least for things to get worse than they are now. South Korean residents are hopeful. During their talks, Kim joked that he would make sure not to interrupt Moon's sleep anymore, a reference to the North's early morning missile test last year, according to Moon spokesperson Yoon Young Chan. Kim also referred to North Korea's Yeonpyeong Island that North Korea attacked in 2010, killing 4 people. He said its residents who have been living in fear of North Korea's weapons have high hopes the summit will help heal most past scars. Kim said he'd visit Seoul's presidential Blue House if invited. The historic greeting of these two leaders, which may be the images most remembered from the summit, was planned to the last detail. However, the multiple border crossings may have been unplanned. Unexpected crossings between two countries. As thousands of journalists were kept in a huge conference well away from the summit, except for a small group of reporters at the border, waited and watched. Moon stood near the Korea's dividing line. He moved forward the moment he glimpsed Kim appearing in front of the building on the northern side. They smiled broadly and shook hands with the border between them. Moon then invited Kim to cross into the south, and after Kim did so, Moon said, "You have crossed into the south, but when do I go across?" Kim replied, "Why don't we go across now?" And then grasped Moon's hands and led him into the north and then back into the south. Moon then led Kim along a red carpet into South Korean territory. 2 fifth-grade students from the Daesongdong Elementary School greeted the leaders and gave Kim flowers. An honor guard stood at attention, with a military band playing traditional Korean folk songs beloved by both Koreas. Then they took a photo outside the Peace House, where the summit took place, in front of a painting of South Korea's Bukhan Mountain. Kim's sister, Kim Yo-jong, was by Kim's side throughout the ceremony, handing him a pen to sign a guest book, holding the children's flowers and scribbling notes. Past so-called breakthroughs. Expectations are generally low on the nuclear issue. Past so-called breakthroughs on North Korea's weapons have collapsed amid charges of cheating and bad faith. Some, however, say they only get a deal as to what the Koreans tried. Sit down and see what's possible. The White House said in a statement that it is hopeful that talks will achieve progress toward a future of peace and prosperity for the entire Korean peninsula. So there's that video. If you manage to stay for the entire video, make sure that you click on the link, open up that Flipgrid, and give me 2 things that you learned from this article and 2 questions you may have after reading this article. And like always, make sure you like this video and subscribe. And just to make sure you listen to the video the whole time, go ahead and meow for me. Thank you.